welcome back. Tonight, we look at the true purpose of lighthouses. Most people believe they were built to warn passing ships of dangerous rocks, but on the isolated, jagged cliffs of Black Reef, the lighthouse serves a very different purpose. Its beam isn't meant for the ships, it is meant for the water. In 1842, a prison ship called the Tartarus was caught in a hurricane and smashed against Black Reef. To prevent escape, the warden ordered the prisoners to be chained to massive iron ballast blocks. When the ship went down, over 200 men were dragged alive into the abyssal trench below the reef. The ocean pressure didn't just drown them, it crushed them, it changed them. The absolute darkness of the trench mutated the prisoners into something else entirely. They became the trench walkers, pale, bloated horrors with no eyes, dragging the rusted iron chains that still bind their wrists, and they despised the light. In 1974, Thomas Wade took the job as the Black Reef Keeper. His predecessor gave him only one piece of advice: never let the main bulb die. The beam of the lighthouse shines directly over the trench. The intense light pins the trench walkers down in the deep water, paralyzing them. If the light goes out, they start climbing. For 3 months, Thomas did his job perfectly until a massive electrical storm fried the main generator. At 1 a.m. on a freezing Tuesday, the massive bulb sputtered, sparked, and died. Black Reef was plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. Thomas cursed, grabbing his flashlight to head down the spiral staircase to the basement generator, but before he could take a single step, he heard it. Coming from the jagged rocks just outside the heavy steel door at the bottom of the lighthouse. Clink, drag, clink, drag. It was the sound of heavy, rusted iron scraping against wet stone, dozens of them. They were pulling themselves up from the trench, climbing the side of the lighthouse like pale, bloated spiders. Thomas froze. The heavy steel door at the bottom of the stairs shuddered violently. Something impossibly heavy was slamming against it. Then he heard a wet, gurgling sound, the sound of lungs filled with seawater trying to speak. "Let us in." Panic set in. Thomas's flashlight wouldn't be strong enough. He ripped open the emergency box and struck a massive red magnesium flare. The control room was bathed in harsh, blinding crimson light. A massive crash echoed from below. The steel door gave way. Heavy, wet footsteps began to ascend the spiral staircase. Thomas held the burning red flare over the railing. The crimson light revealed them. 5 trench walkers. Their eyes were eaten away by the sea, their jaws hanging open. But the moment the red light hit them, they froze instantly, turning into grotesque statues. The light paralyzed them, but the flare was only rated to burn for 3 minutes. Thomas had to get past them to the basement generator. He began to walk down the spiral stairs, holding the dying flare. He had to keep the light on them. If he looked away, if the light shifted, they moved. Every time the flare flickered, the creatures hitched forward, millimeter by millimeter, their unhinged jaws snapping silently in the dark. Thomas squeezed past their freezing, waterlogged bodies, the smell of rotting kelp making him gag. He was 10 feet from the generator when the flare began to violently spit. The magnesium was burning out. 3 minutes were up. The red light shrunk to a tiny spark. Thomas lunged for the generator switch in the pitch black. The moment the light died, the paralysis broke. The rusted chains rattled wildly as the creatures lunged through the darkness, their wet hands reaching out to tear him apart. With one desperate, blind swing, Thomas slammed his hand onto the main breaker. The generators roared to life. The basement lights snapped on, followed instantly by the massive beam at the top of the tower. Thomas collapsed, breathing heavily. The creatures vanished, retreating from the blinding light, diving back into the abyssal trench. Thomas survived the night, but when the rescue boat arrived the next morning, they found him sitting in the corner, staring blankly at the floor. Resting at the foot of his bed was a single massive link of rusted iron chain.